Hello, welcome back to Korg Industries. Yes, Korg. I'd like to talk to you today about this beautiful little machine. This is the Korg Monotron. Now, I've had one of these for about 6 or so years. It's a wonderful little machine, inexpensive, but with a range of really cool sounds and features in a tiny case. It's absolutely fantastic, from cool squeaky noises to full-blown Larry synthesizer sounds. It's equipped with one of these ribbon sensors that you can slide along. It has headphone out, auxiliary out, volume control, and its main modes are dictated by pitch and cutoff, which are on the power switch there. If you haven't seen one, the main controls on top of just above the ribbon here are a VCO, LFO, and a VCF as well. So actually, for a tiny little, almost like toy-like device, it's pretty darn good. And as I said, I'd use mine for various different things. One of my favourite techniques to do is to grab one of these clips that you get at Poundland, one of these little snappy snap things, and when you switch it on, if you're very gentle, maybe a peg would be a better approach than actually using one of these. You can actually get it to drone whatever note you choose, send that off to an effect, and you can tune that note accordingly with whatever note you desire. So yeah, these are probably more suited to kids' toys than something as sensitive as this, so maybe go with a peg for this, but these things, yeah, really good. So I've enjoyed having this, and when I read online about people circuit bending them, I was both intrigued and too petrified, because I wouldn't want to damage my my baby little Monotron. I do love it so. Then this happened. Now, I of course was the winning bid, and it changed everything. Not only did I now own 2 Monotrons, but I actually owned the full set, the full 3, having 2 of the original Monotron, as well as a duo, and the delay, the one I was really after, the Monotron delay, with absolutely insane feedback on it. Brilliant stuff. So, having got such a bargain as that, I figured, well, I can probably afford to try some of the mods on the original Monotron, now owning 2. So I came up with this. This is the Monotron Plus, and only a little tiny bit of research led me to the circuit on what to do for this, and I'm just going to talk you through today about the process of turning your Monotron into something that can be operated, certainly in terms of altering the Monotron's gate, pitch and cutoff features using CV. And that CV can come from your rack modular if you're one of those posh types, or if you're like me, taking sort of baby steps into that world, looking at the use of the Coma Electronic Field Kit and the Field Kit effects. Interesting ways that you can control with and play with CV are certainly something I'm interested in at the moment. So where to start? Well, I knew about these mods from Instagram and other such places, and when I got the mother load of eBay auction, I was intrigued as to sort of where to start, because there are a few known mods for this. Yeah, a little search revealed online this. And this was part of a video by Magazine.com, who do all sorts of cool little things. You might remember the EMF sensor that we tested against the Soma. That was another one from Make. So yeah, they do have some great little circuits up there if you want to try one out. And the video was good as well. So I'll try to cover the same sort of territory, but what I want to show you is how straightforward it is to actually make these modifications, with actually really the biggest issue being where you house the circuits, the additional components, because you need to have some form of connection to the Monotron circuit, and fine, I understand that, but the components to do that are just a tiny bit too big to fit into this case. This case is so tiny, there's no room inside for anything extra. So this breakout box was the route I chose to go. As well as that, another key decision to make is how you attach your Monotron to that breakout box. Do you have something that's permanently attached? I personally didn't want that. I wanted the option to use as much of the Monotron as it was previously before I started modifying it. And so I opted for this, which was a USB. USB connections inside have 4 cores. So I've labelled this one not USB because it's not USB. You shouldn't plug that into a USB slot. You'll cause some damage, I feel sure. But it's a nice, simple connection that you can make to the breakout box using those 4 pins. And those 4 pins, quite simply, 4 connections inside, which I'll show you in a second, that go to connections for gate, for the cutoff and pitch, and then earth. And that is it. The circuit itself, as I'll flash up again now, is relatively straightforward. The use of the switch and the potentiometer isn't necessary to have on the surface mount. I put them both there in case it offered any sort of interesting usage. The switch is useful to have on the case, but probably not so much the potentiometer. I happen to not have any small preset potentiometers, instead opted for the big one, just because we all like big knobs, don't we? Don't we all? So that was the thinking behind that one. So what we're going to do is going to open up the Monotron. I want to show you how Korg have put this thing together, and more importantly, what else they were thinking about, because they weren't just doing this on the cheap to save money. They put a little bit of thought into this. So yeah, let's open up the Monotron. Okay, so looking inside the Monotron, to do that, quite simply, start by removing the batteries. You're not going to need those. And then on the underside there are 4 little screws that you'll need to take out. Again, not a particularly tough job. And once they're removed, the PCB is pretty much easily accessible, although, as I said earlier, the access inside is narrow. There is no room for any other components to go inside. So as we remove the casing, first thing that becomes apparent is that the battery terminals, either side here and here, need to slide out and down into the case. So you have to be kind of careful with that bit. Push those out of the way. The next thing that becomes apparent is this, and there's a little connector here for how we attach the ribbon going back to the circuit board. And that little recess here, that will allow you to unclip and pull that connector out. Now I'm not going to go any further and modify this one, because this one's I'm going to keep as is. But you can see it's a neat little PCB there. All the function surface mount potentiometers on the top there, and all SMD components. The interesting bit though is when we flip to the other side. I'm see if we can do this without causing too much damage, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to get a bit of a look at what is going on here. I'll try and get a photograph to show you up close. Korg are up to something here. They've designed this, it's my suspicion, and I know other people agree with this, but with the ability for the person using it to modify it. Why else would they go to the trouble of not only providing extra large copper pads here where you can solder onto, but not just those pads, but to go to the point of labeling cutoff, the VCO, pitch, the gate, ground, VCC. They didn't have to go in and label all of those things. Those points are clearly marked out for people to get to. And I've got to applaud Korg for doing that, because not everyone wants to go and modify their lovely little pocket synthesizer they have, but some people might. And so for that in mind, yeah, hats off to Korg for making that possible. Yeah, I'll flash up in a moment a zoomed in version of that so you know exactly what we're looking for. But the main parts that you will be needing to locate in order to put together your own breakout box really are to focus on the cutoff, the gate, and the pitch. These three connectors here on our breakout box, they are quite simply just 3.5mm mono female connectors with outs that would then go to your CV. So well, to be fair, actually, the technical way would be to say that the CV will be coming in and controlling the Monotron. You can pick and choose which one. You can use these multiply as well. You can use all three at the same time. And on the circuit, the connections to these are literally those pads that I've just shown you here. All right. So they're very, very straightforward to attach. You will literally go and join each of those marks in the circuit diagram that says to go to cutoff or wherever you need to go, ground, pitch. You will literally just solder on there. Top tip for doing that, because they are kind of small, these pads, is if you can not use massive gauge wire, try and keep it sort of thin gauge. Obviously tin the end of the wire first, and also just tin the pad first and just allow that to cool before you then introduce your extra wire onto here. Again, I don't see the point in opening up the one that we've modified. But what I would say was coming out of the back of the Monotron that we modded, you'll see here the cable that was USB, or sorry, not USB. Our not USB connection simply has, inside this wire, the 4 connections that we need to join between the breakout box and the 4 points on the circuit board, which I've just mentioned. So just choose yourself a color for each one, and inside these are typically they contain a yellow, a brown, I don't know, a red and a black, and just make your decision, pick and attach them to the board. And then with the other end of the USB, I simply used an extender. So on the casing here, this is a female USB that I just attached to this case, which I'll show you in a second. So yeah, that was quite simply the same colors referenced across to the connections on the Vero board and the jacks inside this breakout box. One last note about this, I did have to cut a little part of the casing of the Monotron just in here. That's just to allow where the wire was to come out. It wasn't that bad. This actually seemed to have, if you have a look at the casing here, seems to have a section whereby there is just a little space here for almost like a strap or a key ring or something, and quite simply all I did was cut that little tiny bit of plastic in between, so I had enough width there to get the USB cable through to make that connection. So that's the inside of the Monotron. Next up, let's have a look at the breakout box that we made. This was quite simply one I had in a drawer full of enclosures. These are, I believe, are just a sort of generic Rapid Electronics ABS case. Normally, I guess the reason they're in the drawer is because they're too small for any sort of slightly larger circuits that I might have used, and something like this is a perfect size for this. It is a pity you can't get these components into the Monotron case itself, but yeah, it is very well. It is space economic inside. But anyway, let's have a look inside this breakout box. So inside is quite simply just a very small piece of Vero board, and when I was putting this together, I had it on, had the circuit diagram on the screen of my computer, and I just labelled each of the 4 major ins, and you can see the end of the USB cable here. So we've got a white, a green, a black, and a red, and quite simply, yeah, just chose which ones they were going to be. So this top one here, I think I had for the earth, and then we had the pitch, the gate, and the cutoff. The flip side of that, inside the circuit, it's not a brilliant job here, I must admit, but it was all very straightforward. In terms of components, we've got 3 resistors there, and the potentiometer, which all sits underneath. I really wanted it to be quite a tight fit in there, so as not to rattle around, and the way the female USB went in allowed that to happen quite easily. That is pretty much it. I'm going to show you what it sounds like. I'm going to wire it up with the Coma electronic field kit effects, and I'm going to show you some of the things that they can do when they talk together. Okay, so welcome to my mess of wires. Just quickly run through what you can see here. We have got the Monotron, the modified Monotron with the CV breakout box, the modification. This mess of wires is just a little patch that I've put together for the Coma electronic field kit. I've chosen a field kit because of a couple of features that it has that allow it to probably be a bit more suitable for this task. It's got a part here called Rolodex, which is a CV generator, it's like a sequencer, and you can feed in any sound, and across these 4 steps in the sequencer you can tune them accordingly. You can control the thresholds or sort of velocity of that, and that CV that comes out, so as you can see those LEDs blink as they flash across, that CV out we're going to send to the Monotron, and you'll see what happens when we patch in different cables, sort of just these sort of generic cables into the 3 different inputs. At the moment the Monotron is plugged in and it's flashing away its rate for the sort of cut-off LFO, but it's not making any sound at the moment. If I press a button, you'll hear some of the onboard effects as the Monotron goes through the field kit. So it's a kind of nice and sparse sort of minimal sound, not overboard. In terms of the processing on here, what's happening is the Monotron is coming straight from the output and is going into a frequency shift, which is on the input here. That frequency shift, then obviously having done the frequency shifting, comes as an output through this patch to the Spring Reverb. Spring Reverb arrived in the post yesterday. This thing, which sounds absolutely fantastic. Spring Reverb will be a whole other video another time, as will the field kit, the Coma field kit. That'll come later. So yeah, having come out of the Spring Reverb, we then go into this input, which is for the mixer on board. That mixer, yeah, quite simply just outputs back to where we are up here. The output, I'm using one of these little multi outs just so that we can get as many different outputs as we can to plug in. I want to join a fair few of those to the Monotron breakout box, but let's see what happens. The patch is yeah, I just had a quick play with it a couple of minutes ago, but see what happens when the Monotron is plugged in. We're going to start with the pitch.